Hey crew, it's Ben, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we will be finishing up Deuteronomy. But before we begin, if you are new here, if you are unfamiliar with what we're doing, I hold unconventional beliefs, and I am doing an unconventional reading of the Bible. I am looking at it without the lenses of a determined people or a necessary Savior. If that offends you, this is not the Bible study for you. But if you are with me, let's dive in and see what's up in Deuteronomy. We will be picking up in 31 because we left off in 30. This is the part where Moses goes away. We're getting to the summary of the history of the Israeli people. This was bringing up from around a nation separate from those around them, right? We have seen where the narrative has not quite aligned quite a few times, and that the things that we are told are not exactly the things that are said. All of that we have been through extensively. We're going to go through this. This is Moses passing the torch on. Yeshua, son of Nun, is about to take control. He is going to be the deciding voice. The priests are handling all of the issues on the religious end, but somebody needs to direct them in their ways to go. And that's going to be Yeshua, and it's not going to be Moses, because Moses somehow managed to piss off God. Right? We've talked about that already. There's two different accounts of what he did to make God mad, and neither one of them made any damn sense. So now, let's get into the text. When Moses had finished speaking these words to all Israel, he said to them, I am now 120 years old. I am no longer able to come and go, as the Lord has said to me. You shall not cross the Jordan. The Lord your God himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy those nations before you, and you will dispossess them. This is important to remember, is that they're not supposed to have to fight. That has been the promise since Egypt, that they are merely going in to take possession of the land, and that God is going to drive out. Like, everybody's going to go running in fear when they show up. That's what they've been told. That was the promise of God. Not that they would fight and overtake the land, but that God would give them the land slowly, in incremental steps. He would slowly push the people out. Right? Okay. Yeshua will cross ahead of you as the Lord has said, and the Lord will do to them as he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Ammonites, when he destroyed them along with their land. The Lord will deliver them over to you, and you must do to them exactly as I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous, and do not be afraid or terrified of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will never leave you, nor forsake you. Then Moses called for Yeshua and said to him in the presence of all Israel, Be strong and courageous, for you will go with this people into the land that the Lord swore to their fathers to give them, and you shall give it to them as an inheritance. The Lord himself goes before you. He will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid or discouraged. And so Moses wrote down this law and gave it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. And then Moses commanded them, at the end of every 7 years, at the appointed time in the year of remission of debt, during the Feast of Tabernacles, when all Israel comes before the Lord your God at the place he will choose, you are to read this law in the hearing of all Israel. Assemble the people, men, women, children, and the foreigners within your gates, so that they may listen and learn to fear the Lord your God and follow carefully all the words of this law. Then their children who do not know the law will listen and fear the Lord your God, as long as you live in a land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. And then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, your time of death is near. Call Yeshua and present yourself at the tent of meeting, so that I may commission him. And so Moses and Yeshua went and presented themselves at the tent of meeting. And then the Lord appeared at the tent in a pillar of cloud, and the cloud stood over the entrance to the tent. And the Lord said to Moses, You will soon rest with your fathers, and these people will rise up and prostitute themselves with foreign gods of the land they are entering. They will forsake me and break the covenant I have made with them. And here we have the first problem of today. If he knows this, then why? Why? simply so that you can say, I fulfilled the promise that I made to your fathers, that if they would follow me, I would give them this land. If you're going into this knowing that they're going to mess it up, right? It's like, you ever been to one of those rent-to-own car places where buy here, pay here? You know their business model relies upon you not actually paying for that car. What their business model relies on is you make a significant deposit for this car, and then you're to pay monthly for this car at an exorbitant interest rate, right? You're paying out the nose for this car, but if you miss a payment, they come and take it, and you have to start all over from scratch. All of their progress is gone. That is their business model. Their business model is not to service you with a car. It is to get you as a customer giving them money. And from day one, they have already made their profit off of you. That's the same thing happening right here. Right? God saying, yeah, man. Look, this car right here, this will fit your whole 12 tribes. You slide on up in here, and as long as you agree to the terms and conditions and the warranties therein, then you're going to be golden. But if you deviate slightly, then I am perfectly justified from coming and taking your land from you. There is ample evidence, and I believe that I have shown, but prior to this, that the patriarchs were not men of God. They did not follow the commandments in the slightest. Abraham blatantly disregarded all of them. Every single commandment was broken by the patriarch of, and it just gets worse, right? It doesn't get better. What we're about to get into when Yeshua crosses the Jordan, oh my God, we haven't seen anything yet. All the people that have been gone already pales in comparison to what is coming. There is something coming in the next two books that is going to make everything else look like child's play. So, what they're doing here is they're pledging their energy, because here's something that we haven't really touched on before, but the people who are actually following this will be interested in. You are a battery. You are an energetic. You consume the energy from God, and from the sun, from the food that you eat, from the water that you drink. You consume energy, and you store that energy, and then you give that energy back. Now, you give that energy back to your spouse and your children as love. And you also give that energy back on the interstate when somebody cuts you off as anger. And where you direct that energy powers things, whether you know it or not. The spirit of evil can jump from person to person to person. And the way that it does that is through that, right? Like, you get mad at this person and you scream and holler and cuss them, and then they get mad at you and they scream and holler and cuss you back. And then the next person hears it and they take a side and they start screaming and hollering and cussing. And the next thing you know, everybody's involved in violence. If you look at our prison system, it is like a big battery. There are a whole lot of people there that are energized with anger, resentment, hate, violence, sexual deprivation. All of these people are concentrated into one area, and they're not being made into better people. They are being made into better criminals. That energy is being focused into the service of an entity. Now, I can't tell you what that entity's name is, right? It's probably one of the ones that are listed somewhere, but I can't tell you who's the god of prisons. But I can tell you that there is an entity that is eating the energy that comes from prison. Parchment over in Mississippi is an extremely good example of a terrible place. They treat their people really bad, and there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of unsupervised issues that take place over there. That is not to pick out Parchment, because there is a whole lot of different ones. But I've got a video on my channel about Parchment, and that is feeding an entity. This is going to be feeding an entity too. The blood sacrifice we talk about a lot, right? That is draining a battery. Whenever you take the lifeblood and you spill it upon the ground, you are draining that battery, and you're devoting that energy towards something. Now, what your intentions make that energy devoted towards makes a difference. It really does. Because when you go to church, you're filling a battery. Now, if you're going to a good church that is taking their responsibilities seriously, then you're getting filled with the fire of God. And that fire of God is telling you to go out and love people. But if you go to a different church and they're not following what they're supposed to be doing, and they're not guiding you in the proper manner, then you will leave that church filled with something other than love. The church, when you get around all these people, is at the same time feeding your battery with what the other people are emanating, and you're feeding their batteries with what you're emanating. So if you're walking in there with hate and all of that, then you're going to congregate the people who hate around you, and y'all are going to multiply the hate. The same with love. You could go into a prison that was actually meant for rehabilitation, and where people were actually treated like people and as if they were worth redeeming, and you could actually probably turn that battery into a love situation. But it's more difficult because of the situation. The direction of the energy makes all the difference in the world. If you're being led by the wrong person, you will take the wrong path. If you're putting your energy into the wrong things, you will receive the wrong rewards. If you are not going into it with the commandments of love and growth and forgiveness and change of heart, all of the things that you are called for, then you are going to reap the wrong rewards. This is God about to charge his batteries. Right? We have had several instances of this God charging his batteries. There have been some horrendous displays of sacrifice already made. There has been an entire nation laid at the feet. And there may be some contention about the responsibility there, but as of right now, it's laid at the feet of Israel, and it is dedicated in the service to a specific entity. That specific entity is the one calling Yeshua to cross the Jordan. Knowing full well that the covenant will be broken and that there will be another mass sacrifice required to recharge the battery. Knowing full well that they will do it again and again, because the restrictions, the minutia that holds the covenant, like which covenant are we even on, right? This is like covenant number 5, because God needs a new covenant to keep his promises. But this covenant here is focused on overtaking a land and displacing a conservative estimate of 28 million people. We talked about those numbers before, and that's not even counting the lands they have already overtaken, the lands of Og and Sihon. Right? That's not even counting the people that were put down there. There are 28 million conservative endings being called for with crossing the Jordan. But this God is a narcissist, and he is setting them up for failure. He's going into it knowing full well that they're going to fail. And you can talk about the redemption arc of Jesus. No. God had the chance, how many times now, to put down the law correctly. But instead we get a flawed law with the hope of redemption later. No. And the Lord said to Moses, "You will soon rest with your fathers, and these people will rise up and prostitute themselves with foreign gods of the land they are entering. They will forsake me and break the covenant I made with them." And here's another thing to really remember, right? Especially as we go forward into Joshua and the books going forward, is that they're being told to eliminate. And they do. With like 1 or 2 exceptions. There is an elimination that takes place. And yet, immediately after the eliminations, they start embracing the gods of whom they eliminated. Now, Again, we get back to a consistency problem, right? Because these are the same people. We've already talked about this inconsistency. These are the same people that left Egypt. They saw with their own eyes, according to this particular book that we are in today, the miracles in Egypt, and they're about to cross the Jordan. They're not all fixing to die. They're about to cross the Jordan, and they're going to be keeping this covenant. Right? And so, why? These people who have seen the plagues, seen the pillar of fire, seen the creation of the ark and the tabernacle and all of the things associated with that, have seen the ground open up and swallow dissenters. And yet they still turn like that. I'm talking about in a single generation, not just once or twice, repeatedly. Like the time in the Bible where Israel actually serves God is like a couple of chapters, tops. It's pretty ridiculous. And on that day my anger will burn against them, and I will abandon them and hide my face from them, so that they will be consumed, and many troubles and afflictions will befall them. And on that day they will say, have not these disasters come upon us because our God is no longer with us? And on that day I will surely hide my face, because all of the evil they have done by turning to other gods. Now, therefore, write down for yourselves this song and teach it to the Israelites. Have them recite it, so that it may be a witness for me against them. When I have brought them into the land that I swore to give to their fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey, they will eat their fill and prosper. Then they will turn to other gods and worship them, and they will reject me and break my covenant. And when many troubles and afflictions have come upon them, this song will testify against them, because it will not be forgotten from the lips of their descendants. For I know their inclination, even before I bring them into the land that I swore to give them. So, that very day Moses wrote down this song and taught it to the Israelites. And then the Lord commissioned Yeshua, son of Nun, and said, be strong and courageous, for you will bring the Israelites into the land that I swore to give to them, and I will be with you. And Moses finished writing in a book the words of this law from beginning to end, and he gave the command to the Levites, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Take this book of the law, and place it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, so that it may remain there as a witness against you. For I know how rebellious and stiff-necked you are. If you are already rebelling against the Lord while I am alive, how much more will you rebel after my death? Assemble before me all of the elders of your tribes and all of your officers, so that I may speak these words in their hearing, and call heaven and earth to witness against them. For I know that after my death you will become utterly corrupt, and turn from the path I have commanded you. And in the days to come, disaster will befall you, because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger by the work of your hands. And then Moses recited aloud to the whole assembly of Israel the words of this song from beginning to end. We're going to get into the song, but give me a second to get a sip. And again, this is, just imagine, right? You have to put yourself in the place of these people. Don't put yourself in the place of Moses, right? Put yourself in the place of these people who are being called in front of him. And this guy, who's 120 years old, wandering through the desert, still seems kind of spry, comes out, and he has taken you from slavery by the use of plagues up to the firstborn son of the sons of Egypt, right? And then he leads you out of Egypt, 3 million strong, with all the treasures of Egypt. And you're being led by a literal pillar of fire, who not only is leading you, but when the waters roll back, when the waters roll back, you march across this, and the fire goes and stops the Egyptians from pursuing you until it's at the point where you're going to be safe. And then the fire follows you, and then the whole army of the Pharaoh is just destroyed, right? And then you're led through the desert and miraculously provided for every single day with food that appears out of nowhere. enough to keep you healthy for 40 years. But we all know it's not 40 years, right? This is us. We've seen these things with our eyes. And we see all the various miracles. Like we see the establishment of the religion, and then we see the Levites and Aaron and all of this being placed in place. And then we see the rebellion and what happens with that. And the ground literally opens up. And people witness with their own eyes the ground opening up and swallowing people. And it closes upon them, right? And still, you are going to say, you know what? That guy's dead now. We can disregard all of that. Like, even my kids would know better, right? Like, there's 0% chance. Like, even if my kids weren't born when I left Egypt, by the time I get to this point, and we have been delivered a whole ass land, like two of them, the land of Og and the land of Sion, both of them have been taken. And so, how do you just put aside that God? How do you justify in your own mind? And if you can, let me know, because I couldn't, right? If it was me, there is no way I'm turning from that God. And at least one generation behind me are going to hear from my mouth what happened. I saw this. I will not deviate in the slightest from the law I have been given. But, and not only that, but this guy comes and tells you on the day that he goes to die, like, he's like, okay, God told me I'm going to die. I'm going to kick you this mix real quick, right? And then he spits these bars. And what he's telling you in here is that you will rebel. How can you then go and rebel? Like, I would have to be against that at least. When he was like, all right, you've seen all these miracles, but you know what? You're just going to deviate anyway. The Song of Moses. Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak. Hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Let my teaching fall like rain and my speech settle like dew, like gentle rain on new grass and showers on tender plants. For I will proclaim the name of our Lord, ascribe greatness to our God. He is the rock, his work is perfect, all his ways are just. A God of faithfulness, without injustice, righteous and upright is he. His people have acted corruptly towards him. The spot on them is not that of his children, but of a perverse and crooked generation. Is this how you repay the Lord, O foolish and senseless people? Is he not your Father and Creator? Has he not made you and established you? Remember the days of old. Consider the years long past. Ask your Father, and he will tell you, your elders, and they will inform you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted inheritance. Now, there is an awful lot to unpack right here. This verse 8, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody come in at this, but when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. This is talking about the Anakim, the Anaki, the Raphaim, the Seraphim. This is talking about the fallen sons of God, right? The ones who came from somewhere else to here and played at least a part in the creation of mankind. They all had their own. I know that's going to be a little bit controversial. I personally believe that all people on this planet and any other planet were all created by the express will of God. I don't hold that only one people were created in the beginning. I think that what happened for us, and this is wildly into speculation land, but we have seen some biblical corroboration, was that there were some off-world beings that descended to our planet and raised us at least to a cognitive level. Like, if we were as we are, it raised us to be set where we could think and function in a manner that they couldn't with the local wildlife. I don't believe that macroevolution happened in the way that we currently believe it. I believe microevolution is a thing, right? Like, you change within your species, but you don't change species. I think that God created all of our species, but I don't believe that He limited us to one specific thing, and then we evolved out of that specific thing. There are several different humanoid remains that haven't been hidden by the Smithsonian and associated areas, but there are other humanoids that have been. And I think that while we are all human, that maybe some of our differences can be explained by being put together, so to speak, by different gods, using different materials. I believe that some of the dietary restrictions may have to deal with that. If you look at certain places where they can't eat beef, and other places where they don't eat pork, and some places where they don't eat bears or dogs, there may be some other reason why that happens. And I'm not going to deep dive into that because it is wild speculation. But if there were a seed that were mixed with something else to create something new, and we have all kinds of lore and mythology about beings with dog heads and cow heads and different heads, right? So there may be other source material for that. But this is another confirmation of the others, the ones before. The boundaries of the people according to the number of the sons of God. We have already seen, I can't remember if it was this book or the last book, where they talked about two of the cities. Hebron is one, and there was one in Egypt. There are more. There were other sons of God in other places that did other works. I believe that that interpretation is probably the explanation for the pyramids scattered everywhere. Without getting into the why pyramids, it explains the where from of the pyramids. I believe that they were all pre-flood, that they were all older, except for the ones that are obviously built after, right? Because there are ones like people are still building pyramids today, not nearly to the same scale or level, but it's not the same construction. Like even dealing with in South America, and you're dealing with some of the not the Aztecs, but like the Maya and the older, like in Brazil and Peru and those places. Like you have two different time periods of temples and pyramids being built there. One is an obviously newer construction than the other. All right, let's get forward. I just wanted to point out that this is another one of those points that is pointing to a pre-flood different ruling peoples. He found him in a desert land, in a bearing, howling wilderness. He surrounded him, he instructed him, he guarded him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirs up in his nest and hovers over his young, he spreads his wings to catch them and carried them on his pinions. The Lord alone led him, and no foreign god was with him. He made him ride on the heights of the land and fed him in the produce of the field. He nourished him with honey from the rock and oil from the flinty crag, with curds from the herd and milk from the flock and the fat of lambs, with rams from Bashan and goats, with the choicest grains of wheat. From the juice of the finest grapes you drink wine. But Jeshurun grew fat and kicked, becoming fat, bloated, and gorged. He abandoned the God who made him and scorned the rock of his salvation. They provoked his jealousy with foreign gods. They enraged him with abominations. They sacrificed to demons, not God, to gods they had not known, to newly arrived gods, which your fathers did not fear. You ignored the rock who gave you forth. You forgot the God who gave you birth. And when the Lord saw this, he rejected them, provoked to anger by his sons and daughters. He said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what will be their end, for they are a perverse generation, children of unfaithfulness. They have provoked my jealousy by that which is not God. They have enraged me with their worthless idols. So I will make them jealous by those who are not a people. I will make them angry by a nation without understanding. For a fire has been kindled in my anger, and it burns in the depths of Sheol. And it consumes the earth and its produce, and it scorches the foundations of the mountains. A fire has been kindled in my anger, and it burns in the depths of Sheol. Once again, Sheol is not hell, because there was no hell and there was no heaven. There was no eternal judgment in the way that we conceive it now. That was not a thing to the Israelites at all. Their idea of death was you went to Sheol, and it was neither good nor bad. It was just kind of there. But it was also considered under the ground, right? They're talking about when Moses stood before the fires and everybody was scared, it was probably lava. Right? It was probably a lava eruption. And so the fire from the depths of Sheol, guess where that's coming from? It consumes the earth and its produce. It scorches the foundations of the mountains, which is again under the ground. And so when the fire comes out, the burning from the depths of Sheol, it consumes the earth and its produce. I will heap disasters upon them. I will spin my arrows against them. They will be wasted from hunger and ravaged by pestilence and bitter plague. I will send the fangs of wild beasts against them and the venom of vipers that slither in the dust. Outside, the sword will take their children, and inside, terror will strike. The young man and the young woman and the infant and the gray-haired man. I would have said that I would cut them to pieces and blot out their memory from mankind, if I had not dreaded the taunt of the enemy, lest their adversary misunderstand and say, our own hand has prevailed. It was not the Lord who did all of this. Israel is a nation devoid of counsel, with no understanding among them. If only they were wise, they would understand it. They would comprehend their fate. How could one man pursue 1,000, or two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them, unless the Lord had given them up? For their rock is not like our rock. Even our enemies concede. But their vine is from the vine of Sodom, and from the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are poisonous, their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the venom of serpents, the deadly poison of cobras. Have I not stored up these things, sealed up within my vaults? Vengeance is mine, I will repay. In due time their foot will slip, for their day of disaster is near, and their doom is coming quickly. For the Lord will vindicate his people and have compassion on his servants, when he sees that their strength is gone, and no one remains, slave or free. He will say, where are their gods, the rock in which they took refuge, which ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their drink offerings? Let them rise up and help you. Let them give you shelter. See now that I am he. There is no God beside me. I bring death and I give life. I wound and I heal, and there is no one who can deliver from my hand. For I lift up my hand to heaven and declare, as surely as I live forever, when I sharpen my flashing sword, and my hand grasps it in judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and repay those who hate me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword devours flesh, the blood of the slain and captives, the head of enemy leaders. Rejoice, O heavens, with him, and let all God's angels worship. Rejoice, O nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his children. He will take vengeance on his adversaries and repay those who hate him. He will cleanse his land and his people. And then Moses came with Yeshua, son of Nun, and recited all the words of the song within the hearing of the people. When Moses had finished reciting all these words to all Israel, he said to them, "Take to heart all these words I testify among you today, so that you may command your children to carefully follow all the words of this law. For they are not idle words to you, because they are your life, and by them you will live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess." And on that same day the Lord said to Moses, "Go up into the Abarim range of Mount Nebo, in the land of Moab, across from Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites as their own possession. And there, on the mountain that you climb, you will die and be gathered to your people, just as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and gathered to his people. For at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, both of you broke faith with me among the Israelites by failing to treat me as holy in their presence. Although you shall see from a distance the land that I am giving the Israelites, you shall not enter it." And so Moses is going to bless the 12 tribes now. And this is the blessing that Moses, the man of God, pronounced upon the Israelites before his death. He said, "The Lord came from Sinai and dawned upon us from Seir. He shone forth from Mount Paran and came with myriads of holy ones, with flaming fire at his right hand. Surely you love the people. All the holy ones are in your hand, and they sit down at your feet. Each receives your words, each law, the law that Moses gave us, the possession of the assembly of Jacob." So the Lord became king in Jeshurun. When the leaders of the people gathered, when the tribes of Israel came together, "Let Reuben live and not die, nor his men be few." And concerning Judah he said, "O Lord, hear the cry of Judah and bring him to his people. With his own hands he defends his cause, but may you be a help against his foes." Concerning Levi he said, "Give your Thummim to Levi and your Urim to your godly one, whom you tested in Massah and contested at the waters of Meribah." He said of his father and mother, "I do not consider them." He disregarded his brothers and did not know his own sons, for he kept your word and maintained your covenant. He will teach your ordinances to Jacob and your law to Israel. He will set incense before you and the whole burnt offerings on your altar. Bless his substance, O Lord, and accept the work of his hands. Smash the loins of those who rise against him and of his foes, so that they can rise no more. This is a story we did not get of Levi. Levi is the son of Aaron, right? He's the one that is took over after Aaron died. He disregarded his own brothers and did not know his own sons, for he kept your word and maintained your covenant. We don't have that story. He said of his mother and father, "I do not consider them." Honor your mother and father so that your days may be blessed, right? Concerning Benjamin, he said, "May the beloved of the Lord rest secure in him. God shields him all day long, and upon his shoulders he rests." Concerning Joseph, he said, "May his land be blessed by the Lord, with the precious dew from heaven above, and the deep waters that lie beneath, with the bountiful harvest of the sun and the abundant yield of the seasons, with the best of the ancient mountains and the bounty of the everlasting hills, with the choice gifts of the land and everything in it, and with the favor of him who dwelt in the burning bush. May the rest of the head of Joseph and the crown of the brow of the prince of his brothers. His majesty is like a firstborn bull, and his horns are like that of a wild ox. With them he will gore the nations, even to the ends of the earth. Such are the myriads of Ephraim, and such are the thousands of Manasseh." Concerning Zebulun, he said, "Rejoice, Zebulun, in your journeys, and Issachar in your tents. They will call the people a mountain, and they will offer sacrifices of righteousness, for they will feast on the abundance of the seas and the hidden treasures of the sand." Concerning Gad, he said, Blessed is he who enlarges the domain of Gad. He lies down like a lion and tears off an arm or a head. He chooses the best land for himself because a ruler's portion was reserved for him there. He came with the leaders of the people. He administered the Lord's justice and his ordinances for Israel. Concerning Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's club leaping out of Bashan. Concerning Naphtali, he said, Naphtali is abounding with favor, full of the blessing of the Lord. He shall take possession of the sea and the south. And concerning Asher, he said, may Asher be the most blessed of sons. May he be the most favored among his brothers, and dip his foot in oil. May the bolts of your gate be iron and bronze. May the strength match your days. There is none like the God of Jeshurun, who rides the heaven to your aid, and the clouds in his majesty. The eternal God is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He drives out the enemy before you, giving the command, destroy him. So Israel dwells securely. The fountain of Jacob lives untroubled. In the land of grain and new wine, where even the heavens drip with dew. Blessed are you, O Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord. He is the shield that protects you, the sword in which you boast. Your enemies will cower before you, and you shall trample their high places. That is an important part to put into this, because it is very important to note. And I'm going to put this out there before we get to it into the study, right? But the land gets divided shortly after the conquering. They are not a one people for long at all. And one of them turns quickly. The northern tribes, the tribes of Israel, turn quickly to the gods around them and do not repent pretty much at all for the entire history up to David. Judah, on the other hand, the southern part, supposedly turns back to God rather quickly, with the exception of they keep the high places throughout almost the entire books, right? He does right in the sight of the Lord, but he did not get rid of the high places. It's something we will hammer like a nail until it is beat into the head of everyone, because if you deny one part, you deny the whole part. And if you are not doing the command, then you are not doing the command. You don't get to pick and choose which orders to follow. And if you are going to say that God ordered me to eliminate 28 million, and so I did, you don't get to say that you're holding the covenant if you're keeping the high places when you are told to trample the high places. This is not the only time they are told that, but I wanted to point it out. And this is the end. So, the death of Moses. And this is significant in its own light, right? And then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, on the top of Pisgah, which faces Jericho, and the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead as far as Dan and all of Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the way of Judah as far as the western sea, the Negev, and the region from the valley of Jericho, the city of Psalms, all the way to Zoar. And the Lord said to him, this is the land that I swore to give to Abram, Isaac, and Jacob, and when I said, I will give it to your descendants. And I have let you see it with your own eyes, but you will not cross to it. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, as the Lord had said. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, facing Beth Peor. And no one to this day knows the location of his grave. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, and his vitality had not diminished. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days, until the time of weeping and mourning for Moses came to an end. Now, Yeshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. And so the Israelites obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. And since that time, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. No prophet who did all the signs and wonders that the Lord sent Moses to do in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh and to all his officials and all his land. And no prophet who performed all the mighty acts of power and awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. Okay, once again we are going to wander into the land of speculation. What if Moses was not a Hebrew? What if he was sent to the Hebrews by one of these entities because he was half-bred? He was part this and part that. And therefore he had an extended life that we haven't seen in several generations, right? When he went to die, he was alive. And not just kind of alive. His eyes were not weak and his vitality had not diminished. At 120 years old, I propose that maybe he didn't die. And that is why we do not know where he was buried. It is perfectly reasonable to assume that he was told that he could not go into the lands across the Jordan for whatever reason. There may have been some tension there because he came from one person and he was going into the land of another person. And it might have caused some contention if he did so. We get that he was from Egypt, right? And then he goes to Midian, and then he comes back from Midian to Egypt, and he's completely unrecognized. And he performs these miracles, and he comes back. We've talked before how I believe that the first 5 books, this is the 5th book. We are ending up the last of the Pentateuch today. That the first 5 books are an amalgamation of many histories and many stories being brought together. There are many inconsistencies in these 5 books. There are many things that directly contradict each other. The book of Job, which we haven't got to, completely contradicts the things we have seen in Deuteronomy. The God presented in Job and the God presented in Deuteronomy are not the same God. Moses does not have to have been a mortal man in the same way that we think of it. We will see an exception coming up soon where David can trace his lineage back to a place that most people aren't really thinking about when they hear it. Like, for real. Solomon, who was blessed with the rulership of Israel, was not in the slightest bit following the God of Israel, as has been laid out in these 5 books. Like, not even a little bit was he doing that. It was something completely different than the God of Israel that we are laid out here. Now, granted, the God that was laid out here has been 3 different gods so far. We had the God of Genesis, who walked with all man. We had the God of the flood, who walked with one man. We have the God of Moses, that is the God going forward. It's the God of Abram and the blood sacrifice beginning. That is the God that we are dealing with. We are dealing with the God of blood sacrifice. Every single time, and I want y'all to pay attention to this going forward, right? Every single time going forward that somebody is obeying the commands of the Lord, they are laying waste to everything around them. They are destroying and consecrating the blood of everything around them. And you can make the arguments that I used to make about the Anaki and how they are a different bloodline. They are the fallen ones, and they had to be exterminated and eliminated. But that's not what happens. They are isolated. They are put into the place in Gaza. And that's where we're going to wrap this up. We will be coming back into Joshua, right? Yeshua. We will be talking about the conquest of the land, and it gets pretty wild. If anything that we have talked about prior to this has hurt your feelings in any way, I hate that it hurt your feelings, but I am not sorry for it. What is being exposed through me is something that I never intended for. I never intended to go into this to expose the contradictions in the manner that I have. If you can watch what I'm talking about and see my reasoning and logic, and you can remain where you were in your faith, that's cool. I am not here to convert anybody. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I am laying out for you, right? This is happening in real time as well, but I've had problems with the book for a while, and I was like, I'm just going to read the book. And as I'm reading the book, I do not agree with this God at all. He is not a God of morality. He is not even a God of accountability. He doesn't hold anybody accountable for the actual laws. Instead, he blesses the ones who broke it. Abraham and Isaac. Right? These things are not conducive to each other, right? God can't say, you are forbidden from taking the rights of the firstborn, and then repeatedly bless the people who take the rights from the firstborn. It is a direct contradiction of God's spirit to be contradictory. Right? God is truth, God is love, God is creation. He is who created all things. He is the only thing worthy of worship, and you can never lay your eyes upon him. If there is a physical incarnation, it is not God. It can be a representative, but it is not God, because God is too big for that. You cannot manifest inside of yourself. You can influence it, but you can't manifest it, right? You can't say, I'm going to be inside of me. You can say, there's something wrong inside of me. I'm going to go in there and fix it. So, God wasn't something that you can put your eyes on. God is beyond anything that you can put your eyes on. If you can put your hands on it, or you can see it, or you can say it, it is beyond, God is beyond that. There is no gender, there is no reproduction, there is no cohabitation. God is all things, and all things are God. And that's where we're going to wrap this one up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. I know that I hold some very unconventional beliefs and that I step on toes. I don't intentionally step on toes, but it will continue to happen. The things that are in this book are directly contradictory to each other. The things that are coming up in this book are atrocious. And people will apologize for that. And they'll be like, well, it was to do this. No. If God makes the promise that he will drive out the people before you and you will not have to fight, then that's what he means. When he says that he will put the fear upon them and they will not resist you, that's what he means. And what's coming up is not that at all. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit's Take. Peace.